TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. Welcome back, everybody, to TE Talks, sponsored by Through Eternity Tours. I am your host, Rob Allen, and on TE Talks, we get to talk with some of the most fascinating people who make a living out of being wonderful storytellers. We get to delve into what drives them, what is their passions, and you guys get to share with me all the fascinating conversations that I get to have with the guides who work with Through Eternity Tours. Today, we have Katarina joining us. Ciao, Katarina.
Ciao, Rob, you're such a charmer. Thank you for all the compliments.
Oh, please, it's all sincere. It's all sincere. We were chatting before. I think you look fabulous today. I love the side hair and the lipstick. And the very Roman ochre colored sweater almost, or at least it looks a bit ochre.
Yeah, that was a tribute, absolutely, to my city, absolutely.
There we go. Red lipstick and the ochre sweater.
Yes, absolutely.
We could talk about the Roman colors and how they were painted on churches at some other time. There's so many things that are great to discuss. But before we delve into what our subject is going to be today, let us talk about who you are. Tell us about yourself, Katarina, and how long you've been working with Through Eternity.
Okay, so I'm Roman. I'm Italian, Katarina, as you said, and I have been working with you guys forever, since 2010. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Oh my God, yeah. So it was a long time, a very happy time. Mm-hmm. And I am a guide, a Roman tour guide, since 2009, actually. Mm-hmm. I graduated in art history. Mm-hmm. And since 2009, I gave tours. Mm-hmm. And you want to laugh, Rob? Mm-hmm. When my very first tour ever was the Jewish Ghetto.
Was it really?
The very first time I ever had clients, actually, yes. So this is actually also the reason why I decided to develop a virtual tour about it. And this is why I'm always so happy, actually, when you give me the tour to do in, when we run normal tours, actually, I'm the one that do the Jewish Ghetto more often than others, because I love this neighborhood, and which is an incredibly charming neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of that first time, actually, every time.
That's amazing to think. Yes, exactly. So it's a bit of a spoiler. Episode 4, we are dealing with the Jewish Ghetto. Yes, exactly. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And we are going to be talking about your virtual tour of the Jewish Ghetto. But it is true, you are mainly the go-to guide of the Jewish Ghetto. But even before that, let's also talk about some fascinating aspects, because you are truly a Roman guide, but you also have, I always say that you have the best of both worlds, because you're Roman, Italian, and also German.
I am.
And also a special quality that I'm going to pick your brains about even in the future is that you are a sommelier. You are a certified sommelier as well. So.
True, that's very true. Yes.
Yes.
And very often, I became a sommelier while I was being a guide, mm-hmm. because more and more often I had clients expecting that since I was Italian, I had to know everything about wine. That's almost every foreigner expect that. No, Italians know everything about style and wine. No, that's not true at all, actually. But it was a chance for me to take a class, actually, and study and become a sommelier. And actually, that's a subject that I absolutely loved. I did my certification at the Hilton Hotel in Rome in 2016, actually. And while I was studying to become a sommelier, I discovered something really surprising somehow, and not surprising at the same time. Art history and wine history are strictly related together. Very often, they're kind of the same story, actually, or two different aspects of the same story. Very often, important art collectors are wine producers, and the other way around. It's something that goes together, actually. And I increasingly started, I'm not really sure you can say increasingly started, but you're gonna forgive me for that. I started to fit more and more stuff of that of that part in my tours, actually, give aspects. Oh God, I don't know what happened. Sorry, I lost you. Here you go. Okay, sorry. I started to include in my storytelling aspects that have to do with the history of wine in Italy, and with certain aspects related to enjoying pleasure, actually, which is the experience that you can have in front of a painting. And the same experience you can have with a glass of wine. It's a sensorial experience, actually, a bit Caravaggio-like, through the five senses.
That's right. And let's not forget that was the tour that I asked you to do first of all, was the Caravaggio tour, and you developed a beautiful virtual tour with that. And just to talk about, because this is someone, I'll try to make sure that we stay on point, but of course it's just it's so funny thinking about this, right? And I was thinking, oh, I have to talk to Katarina today, and then I started to be happy about it, because the discussion is not work for me. This is like, wow, we get to share what is so fun for us, because listening to you right now talking about the sensory experience, and I was just thinking about that. I was like, of course, art historians and being a sommelier, because as guides, we look at these paintings and we continue to look at them. We explain them, and we show other people, and that aspect of having that eye that we develop from doing this is like, that's what we always try to share with other people. Then of course, I am not a sommelier, but I have gone to wine tastings that you have explained, or some of the others who've worked with us. Of course, it's such a whole world, and then anything that we learn in life just helps what we do. It makes it richer, makes it certainly richer. So I'm sure that would be fascinating. So yeah, of course, wine and Caravaggio go very well, and wine and food go very well with the Jewish Quarter. And you were one of the few people when we were first starting this out, because you did that tour and it was quite successful. And then you came to me and said, Rob, I would like to do the Jewish Ghetto tour. And I said, of course, because you are the guide that is like our go-to Jewish Ghetto, Jewish Quarter tour guide. You do a lot of the tour. So let me ask you first and foremost, what is it about that area that makes you so fascinated? Now, I know that you are not Jewish, neither am I, but that doesn't limit us. I'm not Catholic either, and I go into the Vatican and give tours there. So what is it that you like about the area? Like, what is it that inspired you to develop this tour?
You raised a good point, Rob. This is important to understand right from the start. I'm not Jewish, and I'm not giving a religious tour. I'm giving a historical tour that embraces various aspects. And the Jewish ghetto, the Jewish neighborhood in Rome, is actually one of these places in which you will see all these aspects intersecated together. Early on, when we're talking about wine and paintings, we were talking about an emotional experience, not sensory emotional experience, that embraces different aspects that have something in common. Well, this quarter in Rome, this neighborhood, is exactly like that. You have ancient Roman ruins, which are pretty impressive. I think the Jewish Quarter of Rome is the only one in the world that develops around ancient Roman ruins. You don't see that anywhere else. Of course. Anywhere, no? And it's a place for foodies. If you want to eat, if you want to have a unique experience for what concerns food in Rome, you go there and you go to eat in one of these restaurants, because actually the Roman Jewish cuisine is one of the two pillars of the Roman cultural identity, actually. And probably this is exactly what struck me most when I started discovering the Roman Jewish culture, how much the city of Rome and the history of Rome owes to this community, actually, and goes back to that. I'm giving you a very obvious example, the Colosseum. The Colosseum is not just a symbol of Roman history and Roman culture and Roman identity. The Colosseum is also a very important symbol of ancient Jewish history and identity.
Sure.
Because of a series of reasons, obviously. Now, we want to remind everyone that it was built at the end of the first century AD, with the spoils of war that were coming from the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem that was carried out by the Romans, actually.
Yes.
And the donations that were stored in that temple financed the construction of the Colosseum. So it's an important symbol.
Yes.
There's a lot of links that go back to antiquity between the city of Rome and the Jewish community of Rome, which is the most ancient one in Europe. We owe a lot to this community in many aspects, actually.
That is so very true. I love it, and I have to tell you that there was I ended up having to do a kind of last minute tour this summer, and it was for the Jewish Ghetto, and I was like, oh my God, because there are some things as guides we kind of have in our back pocket. People think, oh my God, how do you remember all this stuff? Well, it's not easy. I remember it by repetition, but I kind of said, okay, wait a minute, we have a recording of Katarina's virtual tour. Let me watch this. It was so helpful for me. It was from an Israeli family that, they were very smart and knew what they were talking about. So, you can't just kind of pull this out and say, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about this. You need to be prepared when you're going to the area. But I find it to be so unique. The community is unique. I had always even understood that I was told even that it was the oldest living Jewish community that has been there since outside of Israel, that they've been there for so long. And we're talking about even before the diaspora. And it's a complex history, and it's a wonderful, happy and also sad history. And I really learned that from the way you explained it. I really enjoyed it. And let's talk about that, because there's so many aspects of this culture in Rome and its context to Rome, but really, like, you go into the history of it, like, okay, here is when they get here, and then you eventually go through how they ended up in that area. They say that Venice is where the first ghetto really started, and we're going to learn about that because Giovanna is going to be doing a Jewish ghetto tour of Venice, because she even lives in that area in Venice, and it was very kind of you to give the tour for her and all those Venetian guides. Thank you for doing that.
It was fun.
Yeah, they are a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun. It's so great to be able to meet up with these people. But how did you approach the tour and the history? Because you've done such a great job with it. I thought it was really visually stunning. So tell me about that. Tell me about what you decided to do.
That place, since my childhood, made me always very, very curious, because it was full of bakeries that realized Roman Jewish cookies, but also excellent Viennese Sachertorten, so cakes, chocolate cakes, basically, no? So all these connections in the Jewish community, the German-speaking Jews, the Roman Jews, all these truly European customs and rituals that are actually also connected with Jewish communities. Jewish communities are, in my opinion, a very important part of European history in general. And in Rome, you have been to the neighbors, you have been to the Jewish Ghetto. It's a teeny tiny place. It's like really 2 or 3 blocks, not more than that.
Yes.
And you see all these variety of identities, culinary identity, Roman identity, international identity. In like one street, you see all these varieties. So my approach, you said that, I'm half German. So I am, my mother's family is actually originating from Germany, actually, although I was born and raised in Italy, but I have those 2 identities in me, Italian identity and Northern European identity, German identity, which are completely different. Yet they sort of live together. And this is exactly what attracted me to the Roman Jewish community of Rome, because inside that community, there's the same variety of identities, actually. And that was my approach, to find the connection between the various identities, and yet emphasize what's different, actually, because that's been the story of my life.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And now that the way you've mapped it out for me, that explains exactly why. Now, of course, I understand it because they are very different identities. The identity of Rome, and of course, a Jewish identity, which sometimes is considered a religion or a race, at least from what I've heard from people. I grew up in the northeastern part of the United States, which has also a very strong Jewish community, and we were, where we lived, it was very much part of our curriculum. We had a wonderful English department in my high school. And so, there was a very important emphasis to study about the Holocaust. And, we saw, we read, oh gosh, Night and Fog by Elie Wiesel, I remember, or if that was the right documentary about it, I will forgive me if I make a mistake, but I remember a book that I read specifically of a girl who was in a concentration camp. It was called Upon the Head of the Goat. Now, this was in 1986, and she was still alive, and she came and she spoke to us. And so these things were very important for me, and fascinating for me to come to. And I realized when I came to Rome and learned more about the community, how special it was. And it kind of also, like, through that you reveal and you get this moment to really understand how special Rome is, because it's not just the Jewish community. There are other communities throughout Rome. There's just so many different things, but still, fortunately for us, quite a prevalent community is the Jewish community. And I wanted to ask you, because I also liked how, when you talked about it, because I haven't gone and followed your tour on foot, although we've talked about maybe we'll video us going through it. But I love the fact that, because, unfortunately, we tend to think of persecutions that have happened to the Jewish race through history, and one automatically thinks of, I automatically think of, persecutions that's happened. Oh, they were stuck in this area. But you also talked about that there was a lot of positivity in the first beginnings of the Jewish community. It was only up to a certain point that then it was kind of like, okay, let us ostracize these people. So let us talk about then, physicians of the popes you talked about. So tell me about the positive aspects of when they were first in Rome, that you brought up in the virtual tour.
Well, in Rome, there is a Jewish community in Rome, which, as far as I know, is the most ancient one in Europe since 2nd century BC.
Yes.
Okay? And because of religious prescriptions that Jews had to follow, since ancient times, they completely reinvented, or let's just say revisited, culinary traditions of the peninsula, actually. So this is probably the most important aspect today, not most important, that's the wrong word, the most visible aspect that makes that community unique. Now, the culinary tradition. Okay, but also if you go, I'm getting to your point, but I'm talking about the unique positive aspects. Now, we always associate, as you said, Jewish history with persecutions and Holocaust, which are absolutely important aspects of history. Sure. But it almost looks like that's the only contribution that this community gave to the world, which is absolutely untrue, no? Yeah. Totally untrue. For example, in the Middle Ages, the Jewish community of Rome was probably the most important one in Europe, because it was the community that had a direct relationship with the Catholic Church, because they lived in Rome, like the Pope, actually. And because of that reason, Jews always have been merchants, travelers, people with business since ancient times, which business is the main reason why they come to Rome in 2nd century BC. Rome is a big city that has room for new activities, basically. That's how they, like many other communities, that's how they end up in a big city in the Mediterranean area. No? And as we said, the presence of the Jews in Rome was continuous over the centuries, and started to be strongly discriminated only from the second half of the 1500s onwards. Okay, before that time, there were plenty of Jewish communities all over the Italian peninsula. Let's just think that land banks are a Jewish invention in the 1300s in Italy, actually. Tuscany and Lombardy region, that area in particular. But in the Middle Ages, Jewish communities had important scholars that translated from Hebrew and from Arabic, the Greek classics, actually. We always have been taught now that the Greek philosophers survived to our day, thanks to the translation of the monks in the cloisters, the Arabs, in the Arab philosophers, actually, in Cairo and Northern Africa, but also, for example, in Jewish communities like the one of Benevento in 9th century AD, a community that has completely disappeared because of the establishment of ghettos in the 1500s. But these communities existed and were flourishing and very well integrated with the Italian network of the time. Absolutely. Yeah, there was a very ancient tradition in medicine in Jewish communities. The best doctors were always the Jewish doctors in the Middle Ages, for example, which is why popes in the 1500s, the Medici popes of the early 1500s, so Leo X, Clement VII, and so on, they had their personal family doctor was always a Jewish doctor, actually, of the Roman community, as far as I know. Another important tradition is the one of in the arts, actually, minor arts like silver making and pottery and so on. But that's in the region of Umbria and Marche region. There is actually a British painter who of the 1800s. His name is Alexander Solomon. And he's of Jewish origin, and he has done an excellent job in the 1900s in portraying important aspects of Jewish life, actually, over the centuries. And he is the one that, for example, made a portrait of an artist of the 1400s called Mastro Giorgio Andreoli, living in the Marche region, if I'm not wrong, in the 1400s, where there was an important tradition in ceramics. A Jewish tradition, apart from the Italian one. No? Every Jewish artist has, would never represent anything human. No, for religious reasons, it's not allowed to represent the human figure, which was a problem back then in Italy because Mediterranean art was all about the human figure. No, think about. So they developed their own repertoire of minor art, also used for religious purposes, obviously, in the synagogues and so on. They developed a tradition in Umbria and Marche region, especially in the 1400s, so in ceramics, basically.
Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many wonderful aspects. And let me just put on a sidebar here for those of you who are listening to the podcast, because Katarina and I are also recording this on a Zoom meeting, so that we're going to be putting it on our YouTube channel. Because what I've been doing recently with all of our other episodes, we're at episode 4, is I've been inserting images. So, she's been great at bringing up names of artists. So you will be able to see if there are portraits that exist of these artists. We will put up the images of the artists, or also some of the work that they've done. And maybe we can find some of the ceramics. Our last episode, we had Thomas, and it's a lot of work. I found 215 images, but I think it adds a whole layer on to the story. So we'll be doing that with this, so you guys all can kind of see what we're talking about, because I think it adds on another layer of storytelling.
And there is a place in Rome where you can see, for example, the minor artifacts, the silver artifacts, for example, of Jewish families in the Middle Ages. It's the Museum of the Synagogue in Rome, the Tempio Maggiore, actually, no? And that is also a magnificent example of the variety of cultures I was talking about before. In the first place, the building is in Art Nouveau style, early 1900s, no? And then inside there's a Spanish little synagogue. There's an Italian synagogue. I'm saying Italian, it's wrong. But I'm referring to the fact that the Roman Jewish ritual inside the synagogue is prior to the diaspora, and so it's unique in its. The Roman Jews pray in a way
I've
that
heard it was
nobody
the
else.
Roman style. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also inside, it's a very churchy architecture. Actually,
Oh
it's
yeah, it's
very
wonderful.
unusual synagogue. It's very non-traditional because of the influence of Roman architecture, actually. Absolutely. But anyways, the community had a very strong Spanish presence because of the expulsion of the Jews at the end of the 1400s. There's the Roman Jews, there's the Jews that came from everywhere else in Italy. When ghettos were established, there were Sicilian Jews. There was a small community of Ashkenazi Jews. See how many.
Yeah. They were all mixed, but then they all had their own traditions. I remember the Spanish Inquisition. Then it became that Rome was a safe haven for Jewish people. They were leaving Spain, so then they came to Rome. It's truly fascinating. And then, just to tell people, to let them understand if they don't know the history already, what did, and you mentioned this, but when was this movement of creating these ghettos? And then we'll talk about what they looked like. So when did the Roman ghetto start?
Let's start by saying that a ghetto and a neighborhood are not the same thing.
No.
A neighborhood is a place where a community lives. Mm-hmm. Like Chinatown, for example, not to make an example. It's just a neighborhood. A ghetto is a neighborhood which is fenced off by walls.
Yes.
They have gates. And the community that lives there is not allowed to live anywhere else, actually. No? And it's a form of persecution and discrimination. Okay. And as we were saying earlier on, the very first ghetto ever established was the one in Venice in 1516. My colleague Joanna tells you everything about it. Actually, what's funny about it, it's the word ghetto itself, which comes from an Italian word, ghetto. Ghetto, like the very first island, no, was in which the ghetto was created. There was fonderia. How do you say that in English? Factory that realized metals, no, okay. And the ghetto is this liquid stream.
Okay.
Of like.
To be thrown away, or.
Yeah, it was like the scarico. I don't know how to say it.
Wait, gettare means to throw out, no, right?
Exactly.
The refuge, like a garbage dump, let's say, a place to get rid of.
Yeah, the Italian word for that is ghetto. However, for some reason, there were some Ashkenazi Jews living nearby. Ashkenazi means Ashkenaz in Hebrew means Germany. So German Jews.
Oh, gosh,
they were not able to pronounce ghetto, the soft G, no? So ghetto became ghetto, pronounced the German way, actually. So ghetto came to identify a fenced-off area in which Jews lived.
Yes.
And the ghetto in Rome was established in 1555 for reasons that are related to Counter-Reformation, basically, to a moment when the Catholic Church started looking at other cults and religions as heresies. Now, Catholic Church was making a point with Protestantism and with the rest of Northern Europe, basically.
With Paul IV, right?
I'm sorry?
Paul IV was one of the ones who was.
Paul IV, yeah, exactly. Carafa Pope. Mm-hmm. So the ghetto was established in Rome in 1550 for reasons mainly related to conversion, actually. In the state of the church. Now, they were trying to force Jewish communities to become Catholic, actually. So as a Jew, you lost your civil rights in that time. You were not allowed to carry out any profession which wasn't related to other than to selling old clothes, actually. That was the only profession you could do. You could not become a doctor anymore. You could not have a shop anymore. You could not be a lawyer. You could not be anything. All you could do was selling clothes and the money lending activity. That was always allowed. And you could not own property as a Jew. Not even the property inside the ghetto. They paid rent. And there was no other place in which they could live in the city, actually. as Jews. So they were deprived of civil rights. They could not travel without permission. And they had to endure for about 3 centuries forced catechism, actually. So mass. There were churches inside the ghetto in which they were forced to go, actually. And the whole point was to prove that, I'm talking, of course, there were ghettos all over Europe. Okay, I'm referring to the history of Central Italy.
Sure.
Now, ghettos have very different histories in different parts of the world. But the whole point was to prove that Catholicism was the only true religion, which was a point that had been raised by the Protestant Reformation, actually. So the establishment of ghettos was an indirect consequence of that, actually.
Fascinating.
So that's the difference. The Jewish presence in Italy is continuous since antiquity, and they lived in neighborhoods. From the 1500s, they started to live in ghettos, which often where the neighborhoods had been.
Gosh, it's interesting for many reasons what you're talking about. First of all, like neighborhoods, it's so funny to like encapsulate it. It's saying that a neighborhood is where someone chooses to live with their community, as opposed to a ghetto where someone is forced to live.
Exactly.
The fact, that you talk about them being created as an indirect result of the Protestant Reformation, I'm always fascinated by connections. And I always talk about it in my virtual tour of St. Peter's, that the construction of the new church of St. Peter's was also a catalyst for the Protestant Reformation because of the plenary indulgences offered by certain popes, like one of the Medici popes, right? So then you think, okay, there's a connection there as well. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was, because it is also, it's so amazing to think when you talk about it, because in this time that we're all kind of going through a moment in history that seems like forever for us, because it's been a year and 2 months and could be 2 years, could be a little longer. But it hits when you think of what that must have meant for these communities. And then when you said to me, 3 centuries, I was like, oh my God, of course. Just that really weighs on me, because when you're going through history, and when you talk about it with guides, we often say, oh, and then there was the plague, and blah, 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 blah. And now that we're going through a plague right now, I think we're all going to reconsider that. But of course, it's just like, boom. I mean, it's just like this lead weight when you can think about sometimes, unfortunately, what people can do to other people's, which is sad, but true and not to be forgotten. That's why we deal with history, I think. I was going to say one thing that I think is so wonderful about what you've done with the tour is that with a virtual tour, we have the ability to create a visual that we cannot do per se on foot tour. The Jewish Ghetto area, the Jewish quarter, looks nothing like it did. And you do a wonderful job of recreating that for people, specifically by using, I think it's one artist, but maybe more than one artist. Can you tell me about who these artists are and how that they recreated what Rome was like for people who lived in the quarter at that time?
Well, there is a beautiful series of paintings called Vanished Rome by a Roman German painter, like me, a Roman German, whose name was Ettore Rösler Franz. In the 1800s, he realized, let's use a modern term, 2 seasons of paintings about vanished Rome. Basically, 2 series of images that pictured neighborhoods that were disappearing already at his time. So basically, he gives, in his paintings, we see a city of Rome that no longer exists. At least it's still, or rather, it's still there, but today it looks completely different. And for the ones that know Rome, for example, Tiber Island. Tiber Island is, for us that know and experience Rome daily, it's the heart of the city center, right?
Sure.
In the paintings of Rösler Franz, you see Tiber Island. When you look at Tiber Island, it looks like you're in the countryside. actually. And imagine the places that we know as city center, as countryside, is weird for us, no? And yet deeply emotional somehow, no? So these paintings in particular give back this idea of Rome not being the capital of Italy, not being a metropolis, even though a bit chaotic, a bit old-fashioned, no, but still a metropolis full of people, no? Rome was a town surrounded by abandoned ruins and cows and fields. That's how Rome looked like.
Yep.
And it was incredibly romantic and somehow, you know, that was the charming aspect of Rome back in the 17 and 1800s. That's what the tourists of the Grand Tour came to see. Now, that was the magic they were looking for, actually, a magic that today no longer survives for a lot of reasons. Now, the first one is that Rome became the capital of Italy. In 1870. And you know what? The Jewish communities in Italy played a crucial role in that. They financed the cultural movement behind the unification of Italy, the Risorgimento. They enrolled in the independence wars. Actually, they played an active role in the unification, because for Jewish communities in the 1800s, to become Italian meant to get civil rights, to become citizens, actually. Which is why, at the end of the 1800s, the Roman ghetto is completely demolished and rebuilt ex novo, actually, to say a thank you to this community that supported the unification of Italy. Which is also why there is a magnificent rose garden today on the Aventine Hill, where once there used to be a cemetery, a Jewish cemetery in the 16 and 1700s. That was a piece of land that the Jews donated to the city of Rome. And today the Rose Garden has a beautiful menorah shape, actually.
Yes.
That's all things. And talking about connections, since you mentioned them, you know, the Sistine Chapel has the same size as the Temple of Jerusalem.
Yes.
As described in the Old Testament. Now, so there's a lot of connections.
Absolutely.
Of the stories of the Old Testament, beautifully represented inside the Sistine Chapel on the sidewalls. Now, so there's a lot of links again between Rome and this community. And last but not least, Peter was a Jew, the very first pope.
Yes, he was.
How about that?
That's right. That's right. Also, wasn't it supposed to be the reform of people to follow Christ's teachings? Peter believed that it was supposed to be Jews who would convert to be followers of Christ, and then Paul was the one who said, "Well, no, we have to get the Gentiles involved as well." And that's why I was
absolutely yes.
have a big theme about Peter and Paul together, or on the ceiling. I mean, there's this tons of stuff that one could talk about in this whole community. I'm so glad you brought up the Tiber Island, you know, which is also very much why Rome started and where Rome started, because it was a convenience to cross the road. Because, you know, the whole reason why we're doing this podcast is because each week with our TE Through Eternity Destinations walks, these videos that we have out on YouTube, this week we're going to be emphasizing the Tiber Island and that quarter, the Jewish quarter. Also, I mess up on the video. I make a mistake with the rione of where the Jewish quarter is and the island, because they're right next to each other, but they're actually in two different.
Yeah. The rione, which is the Roman word for district, I guess.
Yeah, region district.
The Jewish Ghetto is Rione Sant'Angelo, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. And I think, oh God, what is the Tiber Island? I think it's Saba, maybe? I can never remember. There's like 26 of them. So we hardly ever talk about it.
Separate though. I mean, geographically speaking.
Yeah, I know. No, it's separate. It's very bizarre because it's included and there's no logic to these, and there's no way to explain because we don't know the exact idea of it, but it's included.
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, below where the mouth of truth is, that area. That's so I think it could be Saba, but you know what? I'll like put in a voiceover and say, okay, actually I made a mistake there. It's something else. But Sant'Angelo is the one for the Jewish quarter, absolutely. But anyway, to wrap this up, Katarina, because it's been such a lovely discussion. I always also want to ask all the guides, because you guys also travel. I know that you have traveled all over the world. You love to travel, and you always take a wonderful time. We work our butts off like ants during the high season, and then you take a lovely vacation, usually somewhere to the Far East, if I'm not mistaken. But
very exotic, yeah.
Yes. So you have traveled yourself, and then you have had many clients come here. What would you say with our segment of TE travel tips? What would you say would be a travel tip that you would like to share with people?
Okay, let's just say, as a traveler, I can tell you, a trip is a strong, intense emotional experience. And before we start a trip, now we start planning and imagining, and we have expectations, which turn out to be the real experience. That's what I mean, turns out to be something completely different from what we expected. And that's exactly the same that happens in Italy. I can see that in the eyes of the clients. Now, this sense of getting stunned, no? This is what I feel I can recommend. Leave your expectations at home and get surprised by it. Allow us to take you away, to take you away along a path that you don't know, and you then don't know that exists. And I think you won't be disappointed, actually. It will be a vibrant, intense experience that you will never forget. But expectations, we want to leave them at home.
That's a great great piece of advice that you're giving, because I think a lot of times people want to have what they have where they are from, and I think it's really good to be able to let that go, and yes, be surprised by the unexpected, and kind of learn about it and stuff. And in fact, that's why I chose the logo that we have, because I always remember something else too. I always remember, like, when you're working your butt off, you're working really hard, you want to take a vacation, and I think people want to go to somewhere different because they want to be inspired. It helps you get through your life, travel to be inspired, you want to learn about new things. And also sometimes you say, okay, I like this or I don't like this, and then you appreciate where you're from as well. So I think it's just, there's no negativity with anything that happens. I think, it's a great idea to expect the unexpected, to enjoy it for what it is. Anyway, Katarina, it's such a pleasure to see you. I haven't seen you since we did that little walk together. Well, I filmed you when we were doing the Copa Day, which was lovely.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. And we'll be seeing you soon enough, because I guess, you and I are going to go in and eat in a lot of restaurants and talk about the foodie aspect of the Jewish quarter. I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Anyway, it's always such a pleasure, Katarina. And we also have a lovely podcast that will eventually come out that you and I talked about, Opus Sectile. So everyone will find out about that. But thank you very much. And we will talk soon.
Absolutely, Rob. Thank you. Bye. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it, and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast, where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.